I think that in the next 20 years, maybe even less, we will see a true change. And I usually joke that my son, who's now 18 months old, will probably not have a driver's license unless he really wants one.
Welcome to Via News CEO and Founder Interviews. Today we have the pleasure to be here with João Félix, the founder and CEO at Mobiag. João, how are you?
Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before going into Mobiag and all that mobility company, let us a little bit about your background.
So my background is in management and finance. That's what I studied back at university after a first stint in an engineering course, which unfortunately didn't go so well. Moved to management with a specialization in finance. Started work at Goldman Sachs in London back in 2009. Then left about 3 years later.
How was that experience?
Amazing. It's really what they say.
What did you learn there?
It's hard to put it in a short interview. I would say that for me the biggest challenge was to be at the level these guys were at. Everybody was in the room was very, very smart. And I had the pleasure to work with some of the smartest people I've ever met. Everybody is very motivated. It's not as crazy as people think, I have to say. My experience was specifically in fixed income markets. So my lifestyle was actually quite okay. I mean, I left the office at 7, it was fine. So it's not as much as people, it's not as bad as people think. And the work environment is very challenging, but at the same time, it's also very rewarding. I mean, I was, I think, 22, 23 at the time, and I immediately got to, or in the first 2 or 3 months, immediately got to cover big clients, the biggest banks in Europe, funds, pension funds. So it's a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of freedom to get your work done and then obviously get compensated for it.
Is it something that sets them apart, the fact that they put yourself with the responsibility of handle things?
I think American firms in general are very much like that. They truly believe that you should be responsible for your actions, and they give you the training and they give you the support you need to fulfill the role you're there to do, but you always have the responsibility on your side. Goldman versus I've never worked at other American firms or any other banks, so I cannot compare directly. However, the good thing about Goldman is because of the brand it projected, especially at that time, they could choose whoever they wanted. So they had the biggest candidate pool to choose from, and they have very, very good recruitment methods. So the people who were there were actually people that understood not just what needed to be done, but also the culture of the bank. And that got to make a very interesting work environment, much more diverse than people think, and they focus a lot on that. So it's a big even internally in the firms. So it's not just a PR move. They do tend to to try and be diverse, to give everybody opportunity to be the best they can be. But obviously, it's also a very challenging work environment where if things don't go the way it's supposed to, then you're going to leave. So it's very much up or out. I didn't get to experience that firsthand. I left before that, but it was an experience I always treasure, and it was a big learning for me.
So after that, what did you do?
So I moved back to Lisbon in late 2011 to basically start the company. First few years I was just basically by myself up until late 2013 when I got someone to work with me, a university friend, the classic move, who's now our head of product. It was pretty interesting. At the time, Lisbon was not what it is today. We were just discussing that before. Lisbon today is a vibrant hub for tech companies, startups, but also established companies.
So we're talking 2011?
Yeah,
and
compared to 2011. I mean, even before, when I was living in London, every time I came back, I felt the city was changing, and it changed a lot more since then. And in the beginning, I had to explain people basically anywhere where was Portugal, where was Lisbon. People confused it with Spain. Nowadays, the reaction I get is always, oh yeah, I really want to visit. I've been, or I have a trip scheduled to go. So the city changed a lot and became much more supportive of what we're building. So tech companies, obviously the tech talent has always been here. Some say it might be underappreciated in the past. Nowadays it's not. Nowadays it's competing with talent from all over Europe. People are working either here or they're getting poached to go work abroad. So it's been an amazing evolution of the city since we started this journey. We were also lucky enough to be one of the first companies to join Startup Lisboa, the incubator, so the first incubator and the largest incubator in the Lisbon ecosystem, which we joined in 2013. It's been quite an interesting journey from there. It's obviously not been always easy. It never is. It's been much longer than we thought it would be, but then again, mobility is always a long-term market.
What are for you the key points that Lisbon has that it makes it stand out in the entrepreneurship and the startup world?
As much as it pains me to say, I think we did a great job promoting the city as a destination, first of all, as a great place to work, because it is. It's by the beach, it's nice weather. It was cheaper in the past when we started. Nowadays it's a bit more expensive, but it's still, it's still affordable compared to other cities in Europe. It's the people here, all Portuguese are quite good at languages, so we can communicate with people who are coming outside of Portugal, not speaking our language. I think we're very open to receive them well, so we feel them welcome here in our city. And then people started to discover the city from the tourism standpoint. Then obviously the work that has been done with Startup Lisboa and others, and also the first companies that came out of this ecosystem. Guys like Uniplaces, even Unbabel, Talkdesk.
Today's unicorns.
Today's unicorns, almost.
Some of them.
But some of the largest startups that began in Lisbon, that truly began in Lisbon, and then went abroad, captured funding. But all this created an aura of, this is something interesting is going on, and that obviously brought, the VC capital, brought the interest of investors around Europe and around the world. And if you put both these things together, so it's an amazing city to live. It's not unimportant that we also have a great tax regime if you're a foreigner. That attracted a lot of capital as well. But in the end of the day, putting together the great city that it is with the vibrant ecosystem that was built over the last 7 years, I think now we're in a good position to support the growth of these companies.
So in 2011, you founded Mobiag. Tell us a little bit about that. So you had a partner. How did that come about to do that?
Well, it was kind of born out of a personal frustration of mine, as a lot of companies are. When I moved, so I'm a car guy. I love cars. I've always had a car. When I moved from Lisbon to London, I could not see myself without a car. But obviously that's impossible in London. So I joined what they call at the time a car club. It would be a primitive car sharing operation. You need to book the car by phone. You had a membership card which you swiped on the windscreen of the car to get access. So for a sort of primitive version of what we know now, we drive now and Car2Go, etc. But I joined that, and at the time there were 2 providers in the city, and obviously the whole onboarding process was very confusing. You needed to fax them documents. They needed to do an interview. It was a proper club, not so much an open service. And obviously, once you join one, you're not going to go to the trouble of joining the second one. So I joined one, and every time I needed the car that was most convenient to me was always from the other operator, which was painful. And at the same time, being a Portuguese national, I had my Portuguese cell phone in my pocket all the time. And so the roaming concept was very close to my heart, because that's something I used every day, talk to family, etc. And so I thought, it would make sense if with one membership I could use also the other cars. That would make everything more convenient. It would double the amount of cars at my disposal, double the coverage, the geographical coverage. And the cars are fungible assets. So one car is not very different from the other car apart from the owner. And with that in mind, I started talking to people in the mobility space. We did some interviews, kind of testing out the idea. And once we had at least some traction from these experts or from these mobility people, that this could be a good idea, could be an idea that worked. We went around, started looking for some supporters. Once the whole thing was lined up, then I decided to quit and move back. To give you an example, our earliest supporter was my ex-boss at Goldman Sachs. So the guy I reported to at Goldman is now the largest non-founding investor in the company.
So how are you about to get funding to your company?
We followed a different funding strategy than most companies. So we didn't really follow the playbook on fundraising because of personal reasons most of the time. Because I had worked at investment banking, I knew people with, let's say savings who were willing to invest and interested in investing in the idea, in the team, especially myself. And so it was very easy for us to raise small amounts of capital. So most of we raised about 2 million euros so far, and most of it has been from private investors. The other investors we have on the cap table are Techstars, because we did their acceleration program in Berlin in 2016, and 2 clients, basically. So 2 of our clients actually own stock in the company, a very little amount, but it was a way to reinforce the partnership that we have with them. As I said in the beginning, this is a trust-based business, so it's very important for our clients also to feel that they are part of the business.
So walk us through so everybody can understand a real life example where someone would use your project there, your company.
I mean, I'd say for everyone who's used a kick scooter or a car sharing car, etc., they would have been in contact with the kind of technology that we build. We basically build a turnkey solution, so software as a service platform to manage these operations. You could manage anything from your client base, your fleet, payments, marketing efforts, etc. Everything from one single platform that runs on the cloud, basically. And then we also provide the hardware that you need to connect the vehicles to this system, and the front end, which is basically the mobile app. So every time you rent a scooter or that you use a car sharing car, you're using the app which we provide to our clients, and in the back end there's someone making sure everything works well and that you can get customer support if needed, etc. And they will be running the operator side of things.
So you can just go to Mobiag and hire a car or a scooter or
no, not at all. In our case, we operate as a white label platform, so we're a technology provider to the industry, not so much a B2C company. So there's no Mobiag branded app on the App Store. That's not the way we do it. So we build that technology for our clients. And that's the way we're comfortable. So we're a very asset-light company. We're a technology company. We want to continue being a technology company. We have experience with operating a car-sharing service. We operated the first free-floating car-sharing service in the Iberian Peninsula from 2014 to 2016, called City Drive here in Lisbon, which we later sold on to a group of Swiss investors. So we learned a lot on the field. And we translated those learnings back into our platform, and now that's on offer on the product that we offer to our clients. But the end user, the Joe on the street, would not be able to understand that this is who's running whose platform, because obviously we're not alone in the market. We have competitors, but it's never very clear for the end user unless you're in the business whose platform actually are you using.
Where do you see the mobility industry going?
I would say I'm one of the middle of the road guys. So I'm not super keen or a super believer on autonomous driving in the near future. I'm definitely a believer of autonomous driving in the medium-term future, and obviously that would revolutionize mobility. I believe that there will need to be a time where both models will coexist. So some cars will be driven by people, others will be autonomous or robotic. And that would, in my perspective, will change not just mobility, but a lot of other things of the way we live as a society. There will be a different premium on real estate depending on the accessibilities. There will be less use for the space we now use to park our cars because there will be a smaller number of cars running around. But those cars also kind of die faster because they'll run more miles. So in the end of the day, it will change not just directly the mobility, that there will be a big change, but it will also change the way a lot of our life is run, deliveries, etc. So I think that in the next 20 years, maybe even less, we will see a true change. And I usually joke that my son, who's now 18 months old, will probably not have a driver's license unless he really wants one. So driving won't be seen as a need, it will be seen as a sport. It's like the same way today we think about horses. Back in the day, people used them to move around. Nowadays, they're a sport, basically. And I think driving yourself will become a sport, become something that you will do if you like to. I love it, so I'll probably keep doing as long as they let me. But my son will only have a driver's license if he really, really wants one, because his mobility needs will be fulfilled by these services. So it's up to us the technology provides, so we're not in the autonomous vehicle space. We follow that closely, obviously, because it's really adjacent to what we're building and it impacts what we're building. But in our case, our long-term vision is all about access. Is how can we provide access to the biggest number of people, to the biggest number of services that can really transform the way you go around doing your business.
So we're more than 10 years into an upcycle. The last financial crisis in 2008. Since then, we haven't had any big recession anywhere. How do you see the mobility industry reacting to a possible recession coming in?
That's a great question. First of all, let me tell you that I'm expecting that recession, and it won't be a very light one. I think it will be actually quite a hard one because it's kind of a long-term debt cycle that's coming to an end. It's not just the 10 years of growth, is much more than that. I think we can bring that back almost to dot-com boom or even before. In terms of the long run debt cycle, that's probably coming to an end. Mobility will be impacted, I think, in two ways. Obviously, if there's less capital and less credit available to people, cars tend to be sold less, and we saw that in 2008, in 2010. That's when car sales went down. That's when the first true car sharing services or true functional car sharing services came to be. Car2Go was launched in 2008. Was actually piloted in 2008, launched in 2010. Drive Now from BMW was launched in 2011. So 2011. So recessions are good for shared mobility because there's less capital available. You need to be more clever how you deploy your own capital. Now the bad thing is that these services also demand a lot of capital. So we're kind of transferring that capital need from individuals to companies. This is already happening. If you look at the sales numbers from the auto industry, a lot of the cars being sold today are actually sold to companies, either because they're a fringe benefit to the employee, or because everybody's buying cars through fleet management companies. So a majority of cars right now is actually sold to companies, to fleet managers, and that will continue and probably increase as private individuals have less access to capital, and these fleet managers have better access to capital because they're banks. So we'll see more of this transition away from the private into the corporate, and once the car is not yours anymore, you're much more susceptible to use new modes of transport. So if I'm offering you a car and I offer you the possibility, and the car is not yours, so you're leasing it from me, but I offer you the possibility of sharing that car when you're not using it, you don't really care. You don't feel that personal connection that people still do feel with their cars. The car becomes just a way to get from point A to point B. If I offer you a discount on your monthly payment by sharing your car whenever you're not using it, you might be open to that. So we're tapping in the case of the shared mobility industry, we'll be tapping into a much larger pool of assets in a much easier way. Going longer term, if the recession is long, it might hinder the capability to develop this technology, the autonomous driving technology. We're still not there yet. We're still going to need a lot of capital to make that happen. And if that capital dries up, for some reason, it might delay the cycle that we're now entering, which is a test cycle. So we're not so much in the deep tech point at the moment. We're in the testing moment. So a lot of kilometers driven in different environments, etc., and that costs a lot of money. So it's not just having a team of very bright people coding the technology for you. Nowadays we're testing it, and that takes time and costs money. So if there's less money available for that, then the uptake cycle or the maturation cycle of the technology might take longer. And that will impact, obviously, this transformational change. From my perspective, and if we look at these long-term debt cycles, whenever the recession comes, big changes happen. We had the New Deal in the US after the Black Friday crash. We had all these policies since 2008.
Regulation comes in.
Regulation, quantitative easing in this case, and there is a big change on how people organize themselves in a society. So perhaps mobility will also be one of these changes in the way that we need to be more conscious about the way we use the resources. It's not just the kilometers that you drive or how environmentally friendly your vehicle is. It's also about the sheer number of vehicles. There's just too much metal and too much resources bundled up into a format which is used only 2% of the time. So it makes sense to liberate some of these resources back into the industry, while at the same time improving people's mobility and people's quality of life. Because if you look around any city in the world, and even the most modern cities in Europe, in the US, you see and you actually look and see the amount of space taken up by cars in transportation, it's immense. So if we can reclaim some of that space back, because there's less need to park cars, because cars will be moving around, etc., for some reason, then we can also improve the quality of life, and by doing that, improve the value of the property, which then tends to bring the market up as well. So I see recession on one hand as potentially problematic, as they always are, but also as an opportunity to do some real deep reforms of the way we do things.
Where do you see Mobiag going over the next 5 years?
So as I said, our business is nowadays is providing tools to operators. We think that market still has a lot of legs to run. We're talking about a market that's growing at around 30 to 35% year on year. It's very fast growing in Asia right now. China accounts for about 40% of the global market, but other countries are catching up. So we still see a lot of potential to grow on this space, and we want to bring our vision to fruition. So the vision I spoke about earlier, about aggregating all these providers into a network that can make these assets available to the end user in a very simple way, we still have to explore that market. So the next 5 years, we'll see a consolidation of the market. The established players in the technology space will keep growing, probably drowning the smaller ones, because although the market is growing, still a fairly small market. And our play will transition from just being the technology provider or the platform provider into being also the roaming platform provider. So we're transitioning away from just being the tool to also being the access mode to shared mobility. We're currently working on other options as well, so not just about sharing, but also electric charging, etc. So trying to address the needs of adjacent verticals where our software could actually easily be deployed, and that's kind of how we want to position ourselves. So our goal in the end is to transition to the access part more than the platform part.
João, you're an entrepreneur yourself. Please share with us a good piece of advice with young entrepreneurs.
I'm also a mentor at a few accelerators, and I get asked that question a lot. What I was to say is, think about your business plan and triple your marketing costs and double the time you think it's going to take to do anything. That was one of my biggest mistakes. I thought everything would just be much easier. People would decide faster. They don't, especially if you're working with large corporates. We're working with the same corporate now for 18 months, and we still haven't closed the deal. The deal is still on, but we still have not closed the deal. So these cycles take a long time. Client acquisition is very expensive if you're doing B2C, much more expensive than people realize. Hear advice from people who have done it, even if they failed. That's probably the best advice you can get from someone who's tried and failed. But always be prepared to spend 3 times what you think it's going to cost, and to wait at least twice what you think is going to wait, and that's still a good outcome. So make sure that that you have investment lined up for that. Try to be as independent of your investors as possible. Investors should be there for you and not try to take the business away from you. But sometimes if you don't plan ahead, and don't do your work, you get in a position where it's either that or you have to close down. It's easier, and I speak from experience. It's easier to be more open to failure when it's a small business, when it's you and it's your co-founder and it's maybe your first or second employee, especially if these guys are developers, which are very easy to get new jobs. Then you can run the company a bit more lean. Once you get to teams of 20, 30 people where we're now, the responsibility piles up. So make sure that when you're ready to scale your company, you have around you people who have done it, who can support you, and who you can talk to when you're having all these questions that will eventually come up. And don't be afraid to change key members on your team. That's also one of our biggest learnings. The one guy that had worked with us pretty much since the beginning of our market approach was not the right guy for the scale phase. Fortunately for me, he understood that himself, so he left by himself, and we got to hire someone who was the person was more fitted to this role, and things are going much better since. So don't be just because they were the right person when you were starting out doesn't mean that they're the right person to scale the company with you. So make sure that you keep an open mind. And you as the founder, you might be the right CEO for the beginning of the company, but you might not be the right guy to scale the company or to bring it to an IPO or to a Series C, because the skill set needed in these different moments is not the same. So unless you're very, very good and you can adapt, you either have to be aware of your own weaknesses and get help from people around you. So if you can hire a good COO, a good CFO, etc., depending on what your weaknesses are, do that, because they will help you keep the company together with you as the CEO. Otherwise, find another CEO. Don't be afraid to change people, including yourself.
João, thank you very much for this interview.
My pleasure.